Hello, everyone. Hi. Welcome to I Know You Are, I Said You Are. It's going to be a fascinating and interesting conversation about gender and all the issues around therein. My name is Sami Shah, and before we begin, I would just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting. I pay my respects to the elders, past and present, and the elders from other communities who may be here today. I'm going to be moderating this discussion, and it is my privilege to be sharing the stage with Nelly Thomas, who is an author, and her book is available at the back over there. We'll get into that in a bit. She's also an award-winning performer and has been called one of Australia's most innovative thinkers in the age. In the age is The Zone, and was featured on ABC's Big Ideas. Hi, Nelly.
Hello, everyone, and hello, Sami. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Seated next to Nelly is Alyena Mohummadally. Alyena is a Pakistani-Australian queer Muslim woman who spent many years as a community legal center lawyer before recently retraining as a primary school teacher. She's currently writing a cookbook on modern Australian cuisine with a Pakistani twist, and her two young sons are her favorite people to cook for. And finally, right at the end, we've got Commissioner Roe Allen. Commissioner Allen is an experienced and long-standing advocate for LGBTQI Victorians and has held leadership positions in the community and government sectors. She's been recognized for extensive community service in 2000 and I believe that's a 3, right? Mm-hmm. Correct. All right. She received a Centenary Medal, and in 2009 was inducted into the Victorian Government's Honour Roll for Women. Most recently, Commissioner Allen was recognized in the top 50 public sector women, Victoria 2017, and won Hero of the Year in the 2017 Australian LGBTI Awards.
Oh, yes. Showing off.
We'll be having a conversation today about children and raising children and with a focus on gendered identities around that and all the issues that creates. And it'll be an interesting conversation because that is something that's so topical right now, but also because I feel like it's an issue that, as parents, all of us right here, have personal experiences with the challenges of. It's a great idea, but in practical execution, sometimes it can be a bit hit and miss, or it can be a bit more difficult than we want it to be. And so we want to get into that, and we wanted the conversation to be as honest and forthcoming as possible. We will have a Q&A section at the end, and I promise not to do the thing of like we leave 5 minutes for Q&A and then everyone has to rush in to get their questions in. We'll finish the conversation halfway through and then open the floor to everyone, as long as you then promise to make them questions and not just raise your hand and give a monologue. It's a two-way street, and I think we'd both enjoy that. Before we start, though, one of the reasons why we're here is Nelly has written a book recently, and the book is called Some Girls. It is a beautifully illustrated and really wonderfully written children's book.
That? Thank you.
And before we begin, and the book will be available after the show for sale at the back for, normally I believe it's charged $35, but today discount of $20.
Total lie, but yes.
Yes. But you can buy it. But first I thought we'd begin by asking Nelly to read from the book.
Okay. I believe some of you very, very clever people have already purchased it, so there you go. You can read along with me. Okay, so this bit won't make a lot of sense until you actually see it, but some girls look like this, and some girls look like this.
Yeah.
Some girls look like this, and others look like this. All girls can look however they want. Some girls wear shorts, unless they're in certain schools in Victoria, and some girls wear skirts. Some girls wear skirts and some girls wear shirts. All girls can wear whatever they want. Some girls have short hair and some girls have long hair. Some girls have big hair and some girls have strong hair. All girls can have whatever hair they want. Some girls are good with cars and bikes, and some girls are good with art and kites. Some girls are good with puzzles and maths, and some girls are good with dolls and cats. All girls are really good at something. Some girls like gentle things, and some girls like tough things. Some girls like pretty things, and some girls like rough things. Other girls like everything. All girls can like whatever they want. All girls are nice sometimes. All girls are bad sometimes. All girls are gross sometimes. And all girls get mad sometimes. Lots of girls are nice, bad, gross and mad all at the same time. Some people say all girls are the same. Some people say all boys are the same. We say all kids can be whoever they want. All kids can be whoever they want.
Every time I hear that, or every time I read it, even the Haley Stanfield song, Most Girls, gets stuck in my head, and I start thinking the rhythm of that. But there's another poem, or nursery rhyme, rather, that it kind of reminds me of. It almost seems like a rebuke of that, which is, little girls are made of sugar and spice and everything nice.
I sing that to my sons. I tell them they're made of frogs and snails and puppy dogs' tails.
So now here's the thing.
And the younger one gets very upset.
Right.
Because he's like, no, I'm not made of frogs and snails. I'm made of spice because I'm Pakistani. So we're spicy.
Oh, he's wedged it from the left.
He made it into another thing entirely. But all right, so is it okay for now little girls to be told they're not made of sugar and spice and everything nice? Or are they still always made of sugar and spice and everything nice, and also everything that's not nice?
Oh, well, they never were. I think is the point. They never were made of sugar and spice and everything nice. I think the thing that shocked me so I've got two girls, one's 10, one's 5. I've been a, self-identified feminist since I was at least 18. I'm now 43. So I thought I kind of understood gender conformity, the pressure to conform to what it means to be a little girl, i.e. sugar and spice. I think until you actually raise little girl, in my case anyway, until I was raising little girls, it didn't become clear to me how intense that pressure is, particularly in the case of my little one, who, like, her favourite things are like Power Rangers and punching stuff. You know what I mean? Like, she's got a short haircut. In old-fashioned terms, she'd be called a tomboy. And this is Deputy Downer to get us going, but just to give you an idea, from the age of about 3, she started saying to us, the world takes it very hard on me. And you know what? The world does take it hard on her. Like, it actually really does. It's very difficult to be a little girl who doesn't conform to other people's idea of what a little girl is, and presumably a little boy as well. And that's actually how the book was born.
All right, so let's take that one thing, because it's one thing. I have a daughter who's 8 years old, and we try to raise her as gender neutral as possible, but she seemed to naturally gravitate towards pink things, and it's always pink, it's always ballet stuff and everything like that. And I can say it's natural. I don't know whether it's natural or whether it's environmental or anything like that. But we all have kids. Commissioner Allen, Ro, you've got two. You were one daughter, two daughters?
Yeah, one daughter.
One daughter as well. And do you feel, for example, that her identity is something that she gets to choose, or is something foisted upon her?
Well, I think she gets to choose, but as Commissioner for Gender and Sexuality, I did the same thing, clearly. Tried to raise my child in a gender-neutral world. She's the most princess pink thing. It's like lesbian revenge. It's phenomenal. And my mother just laughed and said, suffer. She's coming out, she's 9, she's coming out of it. She's gone from Barbie. There was like at one point I did a stock take of how many Barbies had snuck into the house. There were 21 versions of Barbie. Op-shop Barbies, real Barbies. I used to feed them to the dog and call them Barbie bones every time she wasn't looking. But, she came out of it. She came out of it. She's now into this thing called Monster High. I don't know if any. It's like a grueling version of Barbie. It's
like goth Barbie.
It's goth Barbie. So she's still into that reign, but she's very clear about who she is and that she can do anything. And Barbie has changed. I'll give Barbie a bit of a plug. Not that I want to give her much of a plug. Anatomically, she's not changed, but she rescues. I don't know if anyone's had to watch a Barbie movie, but she does rescue Prince Charming now, all that that sort of helpless stuff is gone. She's the lead character and she saves the day. But
We ended up saying to our older daughter, because we tried to keep Barbie out of the house, but I think Barbie's like cockroaches. Like someone
everywhere.
will bring it in Tupperware or whatever. But we said, like, you can have Barbie, but she's got to have a job. Mm-hmm. Like, literally, this is my only feminist compromise. So she has the similar amount of Barbies and, you know, they're doctors and lawyers and teachers and whatever. But it is, going back to your point, Sammy, about the nature-nurture stuff, they live in the world. You know, so even if they live in your household where, you know, gender diversity is encouraged, where the expression of what it is to be a boy and a girl is broad and progressive, they still go to kinder, they still have friends, they still walk down the street, they still go to Kmart, they go wherever. So there's no way of knowing, or there's certainly no way of keeping them away from it.
Alyena, you've got 2 sons, and let's say one of them comes home, or both of them come home with Barbies. And how is the reaction at home, and then how do you manage how do you prepare them for the reaction outside the home?
I think for me, the elder one, Elliot, who gets bossed by your daughter.
Yes.
Elliot, he loved the colour pink, and I don't like the colour pink. I think, I don't like pink. I don't really like red either. And he loved pink, and I had to suck it up and accept he loved pink. And then he went to school, and he came home and said, I can't like pink anymore. And it was really challenging for me, because then I had to then go, no, pink's fine. And he said, I can like red, but I'm not allowed to like pink. And the reason why he said that, I said, why? And he said, I'm already not into sport, and I already don't fit in. If I also tell all the boys I like pink, I'm not going to ever have friends. And he already knew this at prep, and he's in grade 1 now. And yesterday or day before, he actually said to me, and I was talking about difference, and there's nothing wrong being different, da-da-da-da-da. And he was talking about how I'm different, I don't play sport, I don't get sport, I'm not good at sport, but I've got other qualities. I'm amazing on computers. And he is.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was the sport thing, because he wears my medals, he wears my trophies, he plays games involving sport, but he himself has never had any interest. And I've taken him to everything possible. And so when people say, how do you feel if your son was gay? I have to accept my son can't catch a ball. And that's okay, because I have another one. No, that's not the answer. That's not the answer. I was just checking if you were all paying attention. I have to say it's okay, because you know what? I've actually told him that you are what we called a nerd, and it is a good thing now, because you will make lots of money. And because you know how to work computers, and you know how to work phones, and he knows far more about iPads. His school, he already has an iPad.
I'm testament to the fact that it doesn't end in riches.
Yeah, no, you are a nerd
being
too.
A nerd. But all right. One of the things that I ended up doing a lot of over the last few days was researching and reading many of the articles and things about how early on children learn and develop gender identities. And it seems to be, based at least upon what I've read, everything from 6 months in to 10 years. Everyone had their opinion, and there's a different thing. I feel like with my daughter, for example, I can pinpoint the exact moment, and it was largely when she was around like 1 year old. But do you think it is different from child to child? Do you think, your child, they all had their moments where they chose or is it still evolving?
I think if they fit neatly into gender categories, you notice it less, because no one makes a big deal of it. But if they don't, so in the case of my youngest one, Belle, because she doesn't fit into that, and it's interesting, it's not just how she looks. Like, she does have short hair, and she's like a little tough. No, like, she's a piece of work, like she really is a tough little nugget. But it's also her energy. Like, she loves to run around. She's very active. She's physical. If you'll wrestle with her, she'll love it. And personally, I actually think that's why people mistake her for a boy. It's not just how she looks. It's that she doesn't fit other people's idea of what a girl's supposed to act like, what a little girl's supposed to do. To the point where I had one particular caregiver that I'm just trying to anonymise it, say, oh, well, she does confuse the other kids because she wants to play the boys' games all the time. And you're like, well, what are boys' games? You mean active games? You know, it's like, it's 2017. She can't play cricket, you know, or tag, or, I mean, it's incredible.
I can remember the actual day, I think, my daughter stood up for her, you know, for her gender and she was 6. It was Christmas Day. If anyone's ever done that terrible drudge where you put everyone in the car and try to go from family house to family house. We're on the Hume Highway. We stop at the service station. Everybody's there. There's a massive long queue outside the women's toilet. Now, see, my kid is, you know, has had a bit of a open education about gender. Understands by 6, having been dragged to transgender, you know, barbecue parties and all the stuff you have to do as gender and sexuality commissioner kids. So she knew the whole spectrum. And I said, come on, we'll just whip into this other toilet. There's nobody in the men's toilet at all. Come on, just whip into it. And she just said, as loud as you like, Mum, you might be trans or gender diverse, but I'm a woman and I'm standing in this queue. And I said, like all good parents, well, stand there and pee your pants. I'm going in there. At which point 6 women came with me.
Yeah.
But no, she stood there with her legs crossed, literally her legs crossed until she got to, I think a few people let her go in front of them, but she was absolutely sure she was not going in the men's toilet, no matter what.
So how much or how soon can we hope for some of the cultural elements around this to change? I mean, basically, for example, okay, so my daughter in school, there was some boys were bullying the girls, and then the girls weren't telling the parents, and all the parents found out later. And the reason we were shocked by it was because the boys had told the girls that if you complain about it, we'll bully you worse. And I know it's a huge leap, and I'm being super paranoid and everything, but for me that sounds almost Weinstein-esque. It just seems like there is a big part of male culture which encourages certain behavior, certain bullying tactics, and at least, it might be an assumption on my part, of female society culture, which is still entrenched in certain attitudes and responses. If you, for example, are involved in changing some of this culturally, how soon do you think that can change, or can it even change? Or do these kids have it crushed out of them?
No, it can absolutely change. So out of the Royal Commission into Family Violence, and that's what we're talking about, you know, the Victorian government is implementing this year respectful relationships in primary school. Now, if you believe the Australian Christian lobby, it's gender theory gone mad, okay? But it's really about Nelly's book. It's really about...
Not literally.
No, not really about Nelly's book.
Be great for your
That would be
sales.
great.
It would really be good for
Royalties.
sales. But, you know, it's really about just looking at gender stereotypes and violence against women, starting in primary school, starting in early education. Because if we don't do it there, we're not going to be raising, you know, every young person to understand that we're equal and to treat each other equal.
And
May I just say on that, I mean, as a primary school teacher myself, and as someone who's always taught 5, 6, which is a very interesting age because there's puberty and there's all that. And for the first time teaching 3, 4 this year, and in a different school, which has an optional uniform policy, so all the girls are in shorts. But I should also quickly do an aside and say the Department of Education has made it mandatory for all public schools to get rid of the dress. It has to be a dress. The girls can wear shorts. So that Department of Education's done that for public schools.
Public schools,
all public schools have an option. Won't mention the other style of schooling. But what I was trying to say is that teaching 3, 4, and I have 17 boys in my class and 9 girls. And I've gone through the whole year, and from day one, I actually set up this, I need a boy and a girl for everything. Because it would be too easy to just girls get pushed aside. So I actually made this point of saying, if it's lunchtime tiggy, if it's this, choosing your seats at the table, you have to have a girl at every table. And I did this on purpose to make the boys aware that there are so many of them, almost 2 boys to 1 girl, that if I don't do this, the girls will just get pushed out. They will just be silenced completely. So I made a big show of it. And now it's at the point where one of the boys, I'm waiting to see what happens when he does go to high school, because he braids his hair and he chooses to use a female name and calls himself with a male pronoun. And he's only 8 years old, but his mum has said she's fine with it, dad's fine, and he's really happy to play with his gender with me there. And the boys have no issue with it. Even though he's accepted as one of the boys, he chooses to play with the girls. And by doing my girl-boy thing, it's actually reminded the boys, oh, we need to make sure there's a girl at every table. And I know you could say, oh, well, that's just tokenistic, but it's actually making boys at the age of 8 aware that if they don't pay attention, there will be no girls in their space. So it's a way of highlighting that if there's less girls in the room, you need to bring them in. You need to make them a part of your table.
One of the risks we run, particularly with conversations like this in inner city Melbourne, where we are, is we run into an echo chamber. So a large part of I think it's safe to assume most of the people, if not all the people here, are in agreement with us. But that's not all of Australia, and that's definitely not what all of society feels. Just to play the devil's advocate here, what is wrong with boys will be boys and girls will be girls? It's worked out so far.
Who's it worked out for? I mean, I think Sami knows this because when he first came to Australia, he lived quite close to my hometown, but I grew up in the reddest of redneck Australia, in the middle of Western Australia, in a little country town, and come from very working class, rural Australian background. It's Hanson country. That is where I come from. What I find so interesting on gender, though, and I don't know if this is a class thing, because I grew up and all of my aunties worked. My mum worked, they were all strong, they pretty much all had short hair. They certainly wouldn't have got around with makeup on or high heels or any of that stuff, so they might get dressed up to go out. But I guess what I'm saying is that the stereotype of what it meant to be a woman, where I was, even in that very conservative part of Australia, was actually very tough. And you had to be tough to live in that space. So I don't know whether it's because I've moved over here or whether we are going, 5 steps forward, 3 steps back. And, it's a bit like this with gender stuff, but it feels like we're regressing.
Does it? I mean,
it does to me. I mean, not uniformly, but it feels like, to me, that as a little girl, if I were like my little girl, that it wouldn't have been as hard as it is for her right now.
Ro, do you feel it's getting better or worse right now?
I think it's slightly getting better, but we can't take any of that for granted. Mm-hmm. We've got a generation of women who don't want to identify as feminist, and
hate it.
Oh, hate the word.
Yeah.
So we have to help them redefine what it means in their struggle. If that's not the word they're going to use, then what is it going to be? Because if we just take our eye off this ball, we will go backwards really quick. There is a rise in the right, and they are very well organised. And anything around, your book will be, I don't want to jinx it, but targeted, because, it taps at the power base that they have as white, cisgender, powerful men, and they want to hold that power. And so those sorts of things will become radical gender theory. Now, that will be radical gender theory. Sorry, but that...
No, it already is.
It already is? You got that? Okay. Radical gender theory, everybody. We're all equal. Beautiful pictures. Can I just do a plug for the book, which you didn't see the pictures, but it's just so many forms of diversity subtly in there, with kids in wheelchairs and kids of all colours and nationalities and everything else. It's just beautiful. And it's not the issue in the book, but it's just so beautiful. So please get a copy of the book there. You can pay me later, Nell. But it's so important that we recognise all those intersectionalities in the work that we do as well. That's really important. But no, this is a fight that's coming. The Australian Christian lobby, I hate, they're just on my mind. Must have been this postal survey thing I've just been through or something. But they are really cashed up. They're really organised, and they're going to attack anything that says women are equal.
And we don't. I mean, and I know you're playing devil's advocate, and I know it's not your view, but we actually don't need any more evidence of how bad rigid gender roles are. They literally kill women. When you look at the Family Violence Royal Commission, they underpin family violence, and they're terrible for men. In terms of mental health, Australia has one of the highest male suicide rates in the world. We try and construct men to be powerful, in control, have no emotional life. What does that mean when life goes to the shitter, as it inevitably does? You know, so we know we have the evidence from very clever people. The research is really clear. It's not some people like having a go, you know, it's not like some feel opinion thought bubble. The research is really clear.
But is there a argument to be made for maybe making the changes more gradual so people are more comfortable settling into them, as opposed to radical changes, tell them, you know, boys and girls can wear dresses, everyone can do whatever they want to, and then the old-fashioned conservatives will then react badly and go, no, that's way too much for me to handle, if we just kind of slow it down a bit.
They've had their time. My baby's coming through, you know what I mean? Like, I really mean it sincerely. I kind of literally thought to myself, you know, I can either tell her to change for the world, or I can change the world around her. And I don't think for a second that my little book's going to change the whole world, but I'm giving it a crack.
Alyena, what are the parents like that you meet with? Do they have the same appreciation for gender nonconformity as everyone on this panel and in this room does, or do you find more traditional ones there?
I work in a very white, in a West middle class suburb in which all the parents Googled me, and then, like, when they met me, like to say things like, just letting you know that my daughter has an aunt kind of like you, so I think that's why she likes you. And so, which I would reply, what, short?
Pakistani, she's got a Pakistani aunt. Yeah.
But I think the parents who meet me, I think that's not so much. For me, my issue with my sons is not so much, yes, it's the gender thing. I have one son who is not so-called conforming to his gender, and that actually does worry me. And stupid things like, he doesn't pull his shirt off like a boy does. He doesn't pull it over his head. He does this weird wiggly thing that I've seen his other mum do, and I'm like, why are you doing that? No, pull it over your head. Boys pull it over their head because they're lazy, and that way when they put it back on, it's the same way. I've seen boys do this. I know boys do this.
You've
Trust
thought
me.
about that a lot.
But this is because I grew up thinking I was a boy, so it was important to me. And I'm not trans, and I'm fine with being a woman, but to me, you always pull the shirt over. And when Elliot stood his ground and said, I'm not going to do that, I got really worried. Oh no. When he changes in front of other boys, they'll think there's something wrong with him. When he's not able to kick a footy and he can't, they'll think something's wrong with him. And I have had some issues at school where he has been excluded because at recess and lunch he doesn't kick a ball. And I've had to go, it's okay that he wants to pick up acorns, and it's okay that he goes and hangs out with prep kids when he's a year older, because that's okay. For me, the big thing is the fact that they're even darker than me. They're brown boys. And race is what they're going to experience, racism, because they're dark-skinned boys, and sure, they may have male privilege, blah, 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 but they're brown boys. And brown boys do not experience the world the same as white boys do. And their surname is Muhammad Ali, just like me, and they're also Muslim, just like me. So they got bang, 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 thanks to me. But I want to know how they're going to navigate gender, race, and religion, and come out okay on the other side. Because the younger one is into He-Man and superheroes and all of those things. So when I look at him, I just think, I don't need to worry about you. But I worry about the other one. And that's because of my own ideas of, the first one will suffer because he isn't doing what every other boy is doing in his classroom.
Do you know, it's interesting when you're talking about your boy that you don't worry about. So my older girl's more, I mean, you know, like all of us, she's a mix, like, for sure. But in some ways, I worry about her more because she has got, and I think you were talking about this before, Sami, she has got what I think of as very gendered, which is the desire to please. So she has that classic, she's very polite, she's sweet, she's a high achiever, she looks pretty, all of those kinds, it makes
sugar
life,
and spice and everything nice.
It makes life easy. She's tough as well, but it makes life for her is easier on that level than my young one. But I think when she's 14, 15, 16 and someone wants her to do something that she doesn't want to do, she's more likely to comply frankly. I mean, not if I've got anything to do with it, but, you know. Whereas my younger one is more likely, like, kick you in the shin, swear at you and run off. So, I worry for both of them in different ways, and I'm comfortable for both of them in different ways. You know, there's no... I mean, I just worry.
So is it...
We all do. We all do. That's our
Is
job.
it harder to make little girls believe they can do anything, or to make little boys believe that they should let little girls do anything?
Or the latter, I think.
Except for my boys, because my boys
okay.
already believe girls can do everything. I actually feel bad for my sons in a way, because before my relationship ended, both his mothers were, you know, high-achieving power couple lawyers who were out there just conquering mountains. And then when we ended, by that time I just switched over to teaching, his role models were really strong women, and he struggled to have male relationships because he just was attracted to women. And even at kinder, he had no interest in the boys. He'd say, they wrestle, they're rough, I don't like them. I'm going to go and talk with the girls and play with doll sets. And yet I actually felt really bad because his idea is all women are strong. He doesn't actually see women any other way, which means...
That's great.
No.
Your job here is done.
No, it means I have to now protect him, to teach him to protect himself, because now he believes all strong women are there to protect him. Do you see the switch? Like, he's actually now... He claims he's got a girlfriend and prep,
So he needs to know women can be awful too. Is that where we
Yeah,
go?
he doesn't get that.
Yeah,
and I don't know how to tell him that, because
I'll
I
tell
don't
him.
want to tell him that.
Yeah. No, it can be foul.
No, I don't want to tell him that.
But I think little kids in general, I mean, when you say which one's hard to convince, little kids aren't that hard to convince of anything, frankly. I mean, don't you think it's like if they, not that you can protect them from the world, but even looking, you know, during the horrendous time of the marriage equality survey, if any of you who would have talked to little kids like I talked to my daughters when they asked me about it, and I was like, oh, it just means that, you know, our friends out in Delhi can get married now if they want to, or, you know, Sammy could get married to Bobby, and they're like, oh yeah, why can't they? You know, like, it's the older people going back to the conservative stuff. I don't think it's kids so much who require convincing about difference and diversity.
Just on that, it is kids when they're in grade 6
Sure,
and they do
I'm
not
talking about
respond to
little
a
ones.
female teacher.
Yeah.
And I hate the fact that in every school I've taught, they've always had to put a male, quite literally, put a male in grade 5, 6, because there are always boys who will not respond to a female teacher they would a male. And that means they're getting that from home. Because it's just a couple of boys who you just know. And that's when teachers, like, that's what we're doing right now. We're working out where kids going for next year. And we're actually doing things like, oh no, you've got to put him with, you know, the man, because he's extremely rude to female teachers. He doesn't listen in specialists. He responds well to the male teachers. All right, put him in there. And it's
That's
terrible.
where I reckon you shouldn't. It needs to stay with the female
Honestly,
teachers.
it's not worth your life having a grade 6 boy that basically tells you to F off every day.
Well, let him sit outside the principal's office.
Principals aren't as scary as they used to be. They're just not. They make Milo for you now.
But then that's where that, you know, when you say the Weinstein culture, that's exactly what's happening, isn't it? That's where that sense of entitlement develops and where the disrespect, like, you try and work with a 16, 17, 18-year-old and try and get a boy, a young man of that age, you know, that's all of a sudden turn around and go, oh, you've got to be really nice to girls when you're dating them. Well, if they've had 16 years before that where they were allowed to be disrespectful, it's very hard to make that change. If it's done from the beginning, you know, it's much, much easier.
I want to now open the floor to questions. We have 2 people with microphones. We're going to be recording this, so if you do want to take part, if you have a question, raise your hand. They'll come to you and then speak into the microphone. And remember to end it in a question mark for it to be a question. Yep. Yep, go ahead there.
Oh, yep, okay. Hello.
Hi.
How are we going to deal with violence against women when more women and females feel comfortable to express their gender more freely, as our interventions are focused on very gender-conforming and heteronormative situations? And how do we just adjust our focus to be more broad in our definition of women Does that make sense?
It's a fantastic question.
Yeah.
It makes
Ro, I'll
sense.
start with you there.
Yeah, thanks, Sammy. I'll throw the next one to someone else. Look, if you live in Melbourne and you know anyone between any person born female, but allocated female at birth or allocated male at birth, between 18 and 25, if you know enough of them, you've probably met someone that identifies as they or them. Okay, and I'm calling it the third wave of feminism. When a lot of people who really don't experience gender dysphoria in the way I do as a non-gender conforming person, but are just doing it, I shouldn't say this, but it's being recorded anyway. It's more a political statement about not wanting to be in the binary, okay? And where they end up in 10 years will be really interesting, but there's a whole wave of particularly people allocated female at birth who are now identifying as they and them. So I think, it's coming out of, university age stuff, but I think it'll be really interesting to see how we actually move away from the binary of gender, and then how does our interventions work in that space. I think it's going to be really fascinating. And there is, to be completely honest with you, right now, I don't think any of our interventions have targeted this at all. So, you heard it first here in the Wheelers Centre, but we have to actually do something. In Victoria, we'll be collecting data that's not just, male, female. We're going to be collecting data in the future that's woman, man, please specify. We're going to be collecting data. Once we get a bit of data on this, we can track some stuff around how many people identify and how young they are too. And as we've seen, there's a lot more young people transitioning gender in primary school. And people said, oh, it's just a fad, it's just a thing. Well, no. Trans and gender diverse kids have always been here. They are just now being supported, whereas before they were hiding their gender identity or taking their life. So when we see this, it becomes more visible and it challenges gender stereotypes, and it's going to be a whole new ground to work on different interventions. Hopefully, respectful relationships is the start of just identifying that gender is equal, whatever gender you identify, or where on the gender scale you identify.
Do you know what's interesting, I think, on that sort of, what's next level? So I've been, as a comedian, and you do this too, Sammy, I've been emceeing, conferences and events and things for like 16 years. In the last year, I reckon at least a third, I would have specifically been asked by conference organisers not to open with ladies and gentlemen, but to open with welcome everyone, which is a very easy thing to do, but it's clear that is, and I know some of that comes from your advocacy, Ro, but that just little shifts like that are big shifts for the people in the audience.
I was asked to MC the Globe Awards recently, which are the gay lesbian awards for the arts and entertainment, and throughout they told me, say, welcome everyone. And I never say ladies and gentlemen. So in my head, I was like, just don't say ladies and gentlemen, you'll be fine. Just don't say ladies and gentlemen, you'll be fine. I grabbed the microphone, I was ladies and gentlemen, and then I was like, what is wrong with me? Like, just at every chance I screwed up. So
because it's sitting right there in the front of
the
your
entire
head.
audience had a look of like, he's fine, he's an idiot, it's okay. We'll let this pass. So their patience is appreciated.
But saying welcome everybody,
yeah,
it includes everyone while excluding nobody.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And it's not hard. It's not a hard change. I mean, it's the same as when, people go berserk about, oh, you're de-gendering language. It's so hard to say chairperson. You go, no, you just said it. Or just say chair. It's just really not that difficult.
Can we get another question?
Thanks. Apart from buying Nelly's book for all the kids, I would recommend that everyone buy Melbourne's Cordelia Fine's latest book, Testosterone Rex, which has just won the UK Science Award for the best book, and Jeanette Winterson's recommendation of the best book for the year. And my question is, what she does in that book is takes apart the myth of testosterone and the notion that hormones are controlling everything, which I think is making a really big comeback.
Agreed.
So I'd like to hear the panel's comments around how do we stop this? How do we re-educate people around this notion, oh, look, it's just the hormones. Boys have testosterone, girls have estrogen, as though we don't have both. And because I think that's really undermining this notion of like the gender-free kind of approach.
I agree with you 100%, and I think that's what I was trying to articulate before with the 5 steps forward, 3 back. It seems to me there's a resurgence of this kind of biological determinism, going on of kind of like, well, you know, boys will be boys might have been cultural. Now it's just like, well, you know, when they're 15, they get a testosterone surge and accidentally sexually assault someone. I mean, obviously I'm being ridiculous, like paraphrasing it, but it's kind of the argument, you know. So I think that has to be challenged at every step, and it requires scientists to be involved in the conversation, because you and I have both done talkback, and God, those conversations, like you think, is this 100 years ago? Some of the things that you hear, some of the justifications for the Weinstein kind of behaviour, or even the enforcement of rigid gender roles, it feels like, you know, feminism never happened sometimes. So I totally agree with you, and I think there's this kind of quasi-science to it about biology.
Hi. I'm here in two roles tonight. One is I'm coordinating my school as one of the lead schools in the implementation of respectful relationships. We're rolling that out in quite a conservative community, and we're having such a wonderful response.
Fantastic.
Which is really heartening. It's been really great. We were worried, but it's worked really well. So that's my work life. And then my personal life, I'm trying to raise two quality young men. And we turned up at Auskick at the start of the year, and there was girls everywhere. And the Women's AFL has got a lot to do with that. Fantastic. But the first thing they did at the start of the session was, all right, all the girls go over there, all the boys stay here. And I don't know. All my son's friends are girls, and there's heaps of them here. I don't want him thinking that the girls aren't supposed to play with him. And so me and another friend whose daughter was there, and we just said, well, F this. They're not boys and girls. They're 6-year-old children. They're grade ones. They play together. So her daughter stayed with the boys. But then I spoke to a friend later, and she said, yeah, but my daughter really, really wants to play, but she's too scared to play with the boys because they're too rough. How do we help them not be afraid of the boys? You know, I want them to, it's great seeing just as many girls there at Auskick as there are boys, but what can we do to get them to play together, and for that to feel safe, for the boys to feel like the girls are allowed to play with me?
Why can't the coach divide them based on ability and roughness? And I mean that sounds like a joke, but I mean it. Like my little one would want to be with probably most of the boys, because she wants to punch and run and whatever.
Yep.
And my older one wouldn't play if there were any boys there.
Yep.
So why can't the coach go, you know, have some kind of integrative, you know, assessment training session, and kind of go, you know, those of you who like to get a bit rough and tumble are over here, and those who don't are over here. Because I think the other thing we've got to remember in this conversation, we focus so much in the gender conversation about gender roles for girls, but there's a huge chasm about letting boys develop and be entitled to an emotional life. What about the little boy that doesn't want to be rough and tumble?
Well, that's my son. He spends most of the session twirling around the point post.
Yeah.
Can we swap phone numbers? Our sons can
Oh,
have
no,
a
my
play
son
date.
is like your Elliot, very much.
Yeah, well, let's have a play
Very
date.
much.
You know, and they get a hard time too, and especially as they get older, and all of that man up kind of stuff, and you know, that sort of conformity kind of issue. But it's the same whenever there's these arguments about, you know, should trans women be allowed in this sport? Can we not just, like, if you're going to just weigh everyone? You know, like Liz Campage weighs 100 kilos. She plays sport. You know, like just have a cut-off then. You know, tell us the cut-off of how much you can lift or weigh or how high you can be, and do it based on that. You know, it doesn't make sense to me that it has to be boy, girl. Oh, I'm getting worked up. Well, I talk to the coaches. Sounds to me like you're doing this is the thing, isn't it? You come up against the world. You know, I notice even at my kids' school, and it's not deliberate, it usually isn't. But I remember when we first started there, just every week there'd be a boy hosting assembly. Now, no one made a rule that only boys could host assembly, but that's how it went. So obviously being public speaker and, you know, wanting to change things, I just sort of quietly went up and said, can I give some of the girls some public speaking training, and tried to sort of make my own intervention that way. We're all doing all of this stuff all the time, I guess. We just have to keep going. But yeah, I'll talk to you, coach, no worries.
Hi, thanks very much for your speaking thus far. I'm not sure if you're experienced with disability, but my general question is for those 90% of deaf and hard of hearing people who have limited communication. I'm lucky. I can sign with my parents, but that's not the same story for 90% of people. When they're very young and they're accessing education and their teachers are not bilingual and their parents don't have the ability to answer those hard questions because of their limitation on community. So playing sport and things like that enable them to express themselves better in terms of their own gendered identity. But my question is, how do we access those difficult questions within limited language?
May I?
Go ahead.
My community legal sector was in disability. I worked at the Disability Discrimination Legal Service for many years, and then Blind Citizens Australia, and then briefly in housing, which is why I've got my level 1 in Auslan as well. And for me, I don't think that because you have a disability, you are limited in any way. I have lupus and I have arthritis, and I wasn't able to carry and give birth to my own sons, and that didn't limit me in any way. I think that actually having another ability, not a disability, but having another ability enriches your child and enriches your child. It teaches your child acceptance. It teaches them inclusion. It teaches them how amazing the world is. And if you will find your community at your child's school, because, for example, at my school, we have children who are deaf at a mainstream school. We have children who are vision impaired at a mainstream school. We have children who are on the spectrum, mainstream school. And we learn how best to communicate with them and their parents and their families and their service providers. And so I don't think it will restrict you. If you are open, then we are open.
Ro, is there, within the policies and stuff being put in place to help children with gender nonconformity and everything, is there also a focus on children with disabilities, or is that too niche right now for this large battle for the amount of money and funding and everything it requires?
It's not about being niche. There is LGBTI disability groups, and they're doing advocacy. It's about how my role and other roles within government help them get a voice. This time last year, the International Day of Disability, I ran a forum for the disability sector, and they said to me, Commissioner, we don't even talk about sexuality in disability sector, let alone homosexuality. So, next year I'm doing something clearly on gender identity, in that space as well. It's really, really, it's just that people aren't putting effort and energy into it. And, at the moment we're relying on the advocates. For me, there's a lot of young queer people with disabilities that are standing up, and so my role is about helping them get a voice, and hopefully we can do more. But we need to do more work in that area. There's no question there's more work to do around gender identity, because, just like the disability sector doesn't talk about sexuality, the disability sector will be very, apologies to anyone in the disability sector, but will be slow to come around to the idea of anything other than binary in gender identity.
And it's interesting, isn't it, that they're bringing the issues together, like even in writing the book. So obviously I wrote the book, I engaged an illustrator whose work I liked. And one of the first problems that we came up against, one of many, was she said to me, I've never drawn a wheelchair. I don't know how to draw a wheelchair. And I'm like, well, you're going to have to learn.
Google.
I want a few wheeled. Like, I don't just want one kid. Any of you who know me and know dearly departed Stella Young will know that she's featured in the book. I'm like, I don't just want Stella. Like, I want more than one kid, and I want the kids in wheelchairs playing tug of war, and I want them, doing shot put, and I want a kid in there who's got sensory overload. What sensory overload? How are we going to represent that? I'm like, you're going to have to go and read some stuff about sensory overload, and then we're going to do that. And then I want a kid with a prosthetic limb. How do I draw a prosthetic? So this kind of stuff, that is not a criticism of her at all. She had never been asked. So even in books that do aim to challenge gender norms or promote gender diversity, there's not much challenging of other forms of diversity. The kids are usually blonde, skinny, long white hair. My favourite was me saying to her, I want a fat kid. Right? She sends me back, and the fat kid has to be doing something, like not just sitting there. Sends me back a picture of this kid that's like just this really skinny kid with like a fat leg. I'm like, that kid's not fat. So we had to go back and forth 3 or 4 times to get a kid that I was happy enough where I went, look, a little kid that's overweight is going to recognise themselves and not be excluded from this book. But it's not the status quo, even though that is the world. That is not how we represent the world.
Well, I think it's time to wrap up. Really quickly, does anyone here have anything they would like to plug? Any upcoming work or anything you'd like to? Nelly, you've obviously got the book.
Yeah, no, I'm done. Yeah, I've plugged enough.
Yeah.
No, cookbook's taking a while. I'll sign napkins. There you go.
Yeah, there we go. Bro.
Good. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, all right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for coming out, and a big round of applause for our panel.
Thank you. And for Sami, of course.
Visit wheelercentre.com for the best in books, writing and ideas from Melbourne, Australia and the world.